Welcome to Odyssey. Odyssey is a show where we discuss the frontier of crypto's opportunities and challenges in driving real-world impact in the societies of tomorrow. Odyssey is produced thanks to the support of Safe and Ambire Wallet. Safe is the most trusted decentralized custody protocol and collective asset management platform on Ethereum and the EVM. Ambire Wallet is an advanced smart wallet that utilizes account abstraction, acting as a gateway to Web3 applications and providing users with secure and effortless management of their digital assets. You'll hear more about them later on in the show. Let's get to it, friends. Hey, fellow regens, welcome to another episode of Odyssey. On this episode, we have John Ellison, who's one of the co-founders of ReFi DAO. So John is a really dear friend of mine who I've happened to cross pathways across different conferences, different spaces, different Discord and Telegram chats, and was genuinely really excited to learn and hear more about his whole journey, his thesis with regards to network states, environmental regeneration, and the intersection with crypto. In this conversation, we explore and discuss how John came into this whole ecosystem, his belief with regards to how we have to focus on inner regeneration whilst also doing environmental regeneration, and explore where ReFi DAO is heading to with regards to continuing to push the envelope at the intersection of crypto and environmentalism. This is a really fascinating conversation, and I'm sure you'll get a lot out of it. Enjoy, friends. Well, John, great to have you on the podcast.
Dude, Marcus, thanks for having me, man. It's great to be on the other side of the mic.
Absolutely. Big fan of the podcast and work you've been doing as well. So, John, just to get the audience sort of situated with yourself and the work you do, give us the really high-level overview of what you're up to.
Yeah, man, for sure. So, top line is that I have worked with a business partner called Daryl Edwards to try and bring together the regenerative finance community around a shared mission and vision of regenerating the earth using these really powerful tools of Web3 and AI, open data, and open science. And we've really begun our exploration primarily focusing on founders, entrepreneurs, mostly at an early stage, who want to use these tools to address real systemic issues. And we have supported over 300 founders to date over the last 12 months through 3 different cohorts of what we call founder circles, which is kind of like a peer support group that allows founders to support each other through whatever they're going through. And over the last few months, we've actually evolved our kind of ambition and our vision quite significantly and are working towards this idea of a network state to regenerate the earth. This has been inspired by a guy named Balaji, who is the former CTO of Coinbase, who wrote a book called The Network State, with the key idea of having a mission-driven online community with really strong core values and alignment that decide to gather locally in person and acquire land towards this mission. And so we are at our first major milestone here today with our first local node match funding pool on Gitcoin. Local nodes are the kind of unit of the network that describes people coming together to regenerate the earth in their local city, to gather talent and capital into a small regenerative economy and to make publicly verifiable impact for local institutions, local citizens to see this is the power of this technology. This is what you can do with it. Come and join us. So yeah, that's where we're at today, and happy to dive deeper into anything that feels resonant.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll absolutely sort of go really deep on each of the different points you just brought up. But I'd love to start each of these podcasts with the personal story, get to know you, John, as a person. And I think, that's really where we start a lot of these more complex relationships and understanding of what drives you and moves you. So let's start there. How'd you end up to where you are today? Where does ReFi come into the equation here? What's the whole sort of crypto and ReFi journey for you?
Yeah, mate, definitely. Happy to give a quick top level journey into this space. So there's kind of 2 major chunks of my life growing up in the US in suburban America, as a kid surrounded by houses that basically all looked the same and people who drove cars that all kind of looked the same, middle class white suburbia, where everyone seemed like they had everything that they needed, but inside were actually really miserable. And I've seen my mother battle a chronic health issue since I was very young, lose the ability to walk, and seen several friends commit suicide in this context of suburban America, as well as a former girlfriend. And the reason I bring this story as a part of my journey is because I think it describes this pursuit of what I would call inner regeneration, where we recognized in my own journey that you can have all of the cars and clothes and houses that you want, but if you yourself aren't resonant with a deeper purpose and true relationship and connected to nature, then we find ourselves hollow. And this is one of the key learnings I had in my journey, being raised in the US. And as I grew older, I was, introduced to the internet. My dad gave me a personal computer, a Dell, when I was like 9, and I just fell in love with this entire world of learning by doing, by building stuff, building websites, building video games. I ended up starting my first business, building custom gaming computers for my friends in middle school, and just loved playing with stuff. I was a Lego guy. I wanted to like get the motherboard and put in the graphics card and see how this performance worked against that one. And school never really worked for me. I would sit in the classroom and be told to, sit straight and not talk by various teachers. I was raised in like quite an evangelical, fundamental Christian household at a Christian school on Christian Sundays. And I was like, get me out of this place. Like, I want out. So when I was 18, I said, take me as far away from Littleton, Colorado as I can possibly get. And I went to New Orleans in Louisiana. Who anyone listening might resonate with the pretty tragic story of Hurricane Katrina that wiped out a huge part of the city and created a really hard set of societal and environmental living conditions for people there. And in that time in New Orleans, I was studying business while running an e-commerce startup on the side called Just Customs. It was really cringe and really bad, but like I was so down for it. Custom clothes online, what you see is what you get. We handprint the shirts with airbrushes and all this stuff, but proceeds go to like some, disaster relief. First and foremost, the Haitian earthquake. And so here I was trying my best to use technology, to use business, to use design to make the world a little bit of a better place. But I was just seriously failing because I had no idea about finance. I had no idea about management. And I was just like a geeky kid in my dorm room, totally lost in the world, but looking for meaning. And it was in this place that I found myself drawn actually to drop out of college and really pursue this entrepreneurial journey with all my heart. I was reading about building startups in a business classroom while I had a startup in my dorm room. And I was like, come on, this is dumb. Like, I'm just going to go do this thing. And at the same time, I also started looking a lot deeper into my own heart and my own mind, practicing meditation, practicing yoga. I began reading every sacred text that I could put my hands on, not because I wanted to be religious, but because I was very curious about the stories of the ancients and the wisdom that this had for me as an entrepreneur and as a human on, a planet with a lot of suffering. And so from that point on, it's kind of the second juncture of my life as I was 18, dropped out of college and had these kind of two paths. On one hand, being an entrepreneur and trying to build stuff with tech. And on the other hand, being, a seeker, looking for meaning and looking for purpose. And so it was at that juncture that I decided to move to Israel and study Hebrew, to immerse myself in the Middle East. I lived with a beautiful Druze family for a short time that spoke Arabic and taught me all about this beautiful indigenous culture that had been in the same land for 6 generations and had witnessed, the institution of Israel come into their land. And they were peacemakers. And the reason I share this as a particularly prominent moment in my journey, both as an entrepreneur and as a seeker of truth and meaning, is just to see the power that peace has in our world. Despite all of the conflict that we see, there are really amazing practitioners that make peace and bring community together. And this was something that I didn't really understand. I hadn't seen it before. Growing up in a highly competitive, often violent American culture, and being dropped into the Middle East with no friends. I didn't speak any Hebrew, hardly, didn't speak any Arabic, and suddenly being welcomed as a stranger, but as a family member into a new society that, had a lot to give. And so it was from that basis that I actually ended up meeting my wife, building an eco house in the desert, with this really open heart and open mind about creating eco homes all over the world, and that was going to be my next thing. And she was an architect, still isn't practicing today, but fell in love with somebody who loved design, who loved community, who loved family, who loved houses, and who loved the earth. And we've been married now almost 10 years. We have 2 children, and my entrepreneurial journey has changed pretty dramatically after getting married and having like the whole cold hard reality of like paying bills and having a car and like all of this stuff. And so, I've had a number of startups that didn't work out so well, but I was very blessed, thanks to my wife finding me a project in the Bay Area called Peak Democracy, that I was able to support through a major redesign and actually lead the product team through a sizable acquisition from a venture-backed company called OpenGov. And it was at this point that I really recognized, like, I've been in like preschool playing with startups. Like I had no idea what I was doing. Like I thought I did, like I was into UX and product design and all this. But once I really immersed myself in the Bay Area and met serial entrepreneurs who built several successful ventures and had incredible mindfulness, awareness capacity, I really recognized how much bigger and more vast of a playing field that this space is, of not only building startups, but also building them in conscious ways that reflect your deepest values, and really trying to integrate both of these worlds, my inner journey of regeneration on one hand and the outer journey of trying to make impact on the other, suddenly came together in a very surprising way. And there were some beautiful moments and things that I learned in that time that I'd happily pause on. But the fast forward was that I ended up with a little bit of cash out of this acquisition. I wasn't a founder, so it wasn't much. But I wanted to invest, and I'd never really invested before. But I didn't want to put my money towards oil and random stuff in the US stock market. I wanted to put it towards purpose and causes that I cared about. And as I looked at the range of investment opportunities available, I recognized there actually was very little out there that I could trust. And so instead of throwing it into, ESG funds, I said, I'm going to start a couple social enterprises here. We'd moved to the United Kingdom, found ourselves creating a permaculture farm with one or two other families living in community, growing food, raising chickens, having sheep, like totally out of my depth. But I was like, yo, I'm going to try this, the actual hard work, no more software, no more websites. Like let's regenerate this community. Let's create jobs. Let's grow. And that was a pretty major turning point. Like totally got my large slice of humble pie handed to me as I realized I was terrible at DIY. I was so bad at anything practical, and I just wanted to go back into my computer and build stuff, but I couldn't because I'd started a property company that was working with people from challenging backgrounds. Airbnb turnovers are very labor intensive, and our first contractor was a Sudanese refugee. And he also happened to be my first friend in that city. And I could speak a little Arabic, and we created a really nice connection together, and recognized how hard it is to like run a business while also having a social enterprise focus. That grew to a small company. It still exists today. It's called The Good Host. It doesn't really have as much of a social purpose in it anymore. It's one of the reasons why I stepped down. Um, just basically differences of priorities with my business partner who was managing the operations and the day-to-day of cleaning and all of this stuff. I started a circular economy grocery store during the pandemic, as I saw 90% of my business at the Good Hosts, wiped off because of Airbnb's cancellation policy during COVID-19. And I said, hey, I want to create something here locally. I want to make a service that anybody can buy their weekly shop with a few clicks, subscribe to a number of essentials, and get everything delivered within a 30-mile radius in electric cars, all of the packaging being reusable, and we return it back to source every week, like hyper local grassroots regenerative economy. I didn't have the word regenerative at the time. And the business like boomed right away. We had like $40,000 of monthly revenue within like 12 weeks. Ended up acquiring a small business in this pathway. And as a result of acquiring that small business, couldn't actually raise any seed capital because of this really small quirk in the United Kingdom called SEIS. If anyone's in the UK, I'm sorry if you have had similar stories, but in essence, had a pretty shock moment in the second lockdown of the pandemic, where I was about to close a sizable 6-figure funding round, and the authorities of HMRC just said, no, you can't. You are not eligible for this major tax relief, like a 10x reduction in risk for all of your investors, and you can never appeal this. So here I was with this cash burning startup in the middle of a lockdown, with 2 children, not being able to leave my house in the darkness of winter. And I had to figure out how to grind, how to like squeeze by and, get the business into a cash flow positive state. And it was in this journey that I actually sold the company and had some room to breathe. I sold it to an Indian business entrepreneur who specialized in food companies. And I started looking for different levers to enact change because I felt how genuinely hard it was to build physical businesses. And when I was looking around, I was really digging into the science of climate change. I had some incredible advisors at Goodery, the circular economy grocery store, and they were very, very high up, well connected climate scientists and also climate negotiators participating at COP. And they really opened my eyes, like, okay, no, actually meat is not cool. Like, if you're going to be doing circular economy grocery store and selling meat, like, you need to really look at the science. And the true nature of it was I hadn't actually looked at it. I didn't actually know what products produce which emissions. And so along that path, I looked very deep into climate and suddenly stumbled upon DeFi kind of by accident, where a friend of mine was a very successful entrepreneur living in Lisbon, doing very well. He didn't seem to have any of the troubles that I did. And he was like, yo, check this out. Subscribe to Bankless, look at Uniswap, look at Aave, look at MakerDAO. And my mind was just like, whoa, there is an entirely new world being built by a bunch of computer nerds just like me in their bedroom, probably in their underwear, creating an entirely different financial system that you don't need permission from. And I was asking permission from the UK government, like, yo, can you give me permission to raise this money? And they're like, nah, screw that. It's like permissionless really struck a chord with me deep in that moment. And I started playing around and it was super fun. It was like, wow, like I can just deposit money in here and get a yield from this. Like, this is crazy. Like, what is this? What is Yearn? What is Curve? And what's Olympus? And as soon as I opened up the Olympus black box, it was just like, okay, I'm going deep, putting little bets here and there, playing with the DeFi space, and then started looking at who are all the people doing stuff with DeFi and climate. Who are all the people doing DeFi and sustainability and social justice? Built out this big list of projects, and along the way stumbled upon Nori, Moss, Regen Network, and KlimaDAO. What is this? And it really struck me, this promise of like, hey, you can actually make money while doing good for the planet. And I was like, oh, really? Like, that sounds great. Like, I'd love to throw some of this, DeFi internet money around and actually make money and like be seen, for doing good and to feel good at the same time. And so, yeah, that was kind of the turning point of where I really got into the center of the refi space that emerged off the back of KlimaDAO and Toucan, and we can touch on that journey in a second. But I recognize I've been on like a however many minute monologue now, so I'll pause.
I love it. I love it. Thanks, dude. No, I think it's really important to set the groundwork. I think oftentimes in podcasts, it's like immediately you just jump to like, hey, what's your project and why are you doing it? Versus who are you as a person and why do you care about the things you care about, right? And so I had no idea, for example, all these personal stories that you shared about your upbringing, for example, or this entire trajectory with your relentless entrepreneurial spirit, right? And so thank you so much for that context. And
Sure.
before going into the DeFi refi sort of intersection, I'd love to just take a quick pause and look a little bit about something that you mentioned, which is inner
Mhm.
regeneration. And I'd love to explore that first because as I mentioned, right, you've just been an entrepreneur since you were in middle school. And how has inner regeneration sort of powered you and been a North Star for you as you have been building and growing? And what does that practice look like? Because I think a lot of the folks who are listening to this podcast are really keen builders, and oftentimes mental health and well-being isn't something we talk about very often. So I'd love to just,
Yeah.
maybe take a few minute detour to explore why that is important for you. How has that evolved over time as well?
Yeah, thanks, Marcus. This is super fun. Love jamming on this stuff. Yeah, and as you were talking, a phrase came to me that actually I haven't really used before, but it feels resonant in this moment, which is inner regeneration to me is about accessing your deepest source of intelligence. And as an entrepreneur, you're faced with sometimes unsurmountable obstacles, conflict at all sides, and conflict inside. Being torn between motivations is a really challenging but persistent dilemma that every founder faces. How much do I push for my own needs versus my employees' needs? How much do I push for my investors' needs versus my customers' needs? There's this constant pushing and pulling that forces any founder who causes the venture to come into being. This is a really key term for me, which I would describe as source. The source, the visionary, the creative leader that says, hey, I have this vision. I'm going to do this, and I'm going to invite people to do this with me. That person has a unique responsibility to manage their own internal world with the understanding that whatever they're experiencing emotionally, intellectually, physically has some resonance and some ripple effects in their startup, in their company, in their family, in their community, as we all do. But the particular leader who says, I'm going to make this thing, has a unique culture signature for whoever they draw in, because whoever they draw in resonates with that. And oftentimes it's a mixture of like brilliance and trauma, strength and weakness. It's this kind of mesh of different attributes of varying degrees. And I realized as I was, 16, 17, working with my best friend for Just Customs, that my own baggage was getting in the way of our business because our relationship wasn't centered in a place of mutual respect and trust. And I had learned this behavior in my past through my society, but it was blocking us from creating good product. And it was this really first initial insight of like, wow, if I don't have a really open heart that I can truly love and support my collaborators, my co-founders, my employees, like I'm just going to run up against all of these obstacles all the time. And so actually I need a foundation of my life as a founder where I can find center and to really see whatever's arising in me clearly, to recognize, okay, I'm feeling really frustrated right now, or I'm very anxious, or I'm feeling impatient, or I'm feeling betrayed. Like whatever these emotions are, they need a space to be welcome, because otherwise they just come out in ways that you don't really want, right? In product decisions, in partnership decisions, whatever it is. And so this is why I really resonate with this kind of saying that regeneration begins within. Yes, for sure. Regeneration happens in the soil. Yes, it happens in our trees. It happens in the oceans. It happens in our society. It happens all around the world. But it happens first and foremost within us. Because if we try and use these really powerful money Legos of Web3, of artificial intelligence, open data, open science, with a heart that is rooted in extraction, that says more for me and less for you is better, then we will just recreate the systems of the past, and we don't have time. And so this is why my take for my personal journey is like, this is the most important thing that I can do, is to heal and to be well and to be grounded and cogent and clear and compassionate, and to lead from a place of heart center. Because when you don't, I've seen what happens. And so yeah, this is penultimate, and it's actually playing in very centrally to the kind of evolving theory of change at ReFi DAO, which I'd love to touch into, around this notion of healing villages in the heart of startup cities. So yeah, thanks for taking us there.
Beautiful. Yeah. I mean, I even feel like that's a, inner regeneration, and then refi, which is short for regenerative finance, right? And so let's
Mm-hmm.
use that as a vehicle towards how does refi DAO emerge from this heart-centered place, and how do you sort of manage to build this incredible community that has had huge impact across the refi ecosystem? And so what does that sort of journey in tangent look like as this process is being birthed and as you start to build refi DAO?
Yeah, for sure, man. I think it starts in small ways. We start every one of our one-to-one team meetings and kind of group team meetings with a 2-minute meditation. And we really try to adhere this religiously, especially when stress is around. It's like today we had this urgent thing. Monty and Anna were in a meeting, and I just said like, hey, we start with meditation every time. And actually, Anna, it's 5:30 in the morning your time. Like, go rest, come back in a bit. This is not a house on fire situation. Like, we're cool. So it starts in the culture. And I've been hosting daily meditations on Zoom as a part of Gitcoin beta because I need it. It's like raising on Gitcoin is stressful. So we invite people into this process, and we make safe space. But more kind of macro picture is that we're really encouraging all of the leaders of these local nodes who are saying, hey, I want to see regeneration in my city. And I'm willing to commit for 7, 10, 20, 30 years to see regeneration. Having deep relationships with these people and inviting them to do the work of inner regeneration as the core mechanism by which that vision can come to life. And so, I recorded this short little video, an invitation to all 19 of the local node builders to just describe this thesis that actually, if we want to regenerate the world around us, we have to regenerate within. And there's this incredible ecosystem of opportunity and, treasure trove of tools and wisdom that we can use of how to be well within and how to be well and in right relationships with ourselves and the world around us. And so combining these cultures of regenerative inner development, personal growth, mindfulness, well-being, you name it, there's this enormous wealth of knowledge with Web3, open data, open science, decentralized physical infrastructure networks, artificial intelligence. This is where the magic happens. Because when we as founders can be truly aligned with our purpose and our heart center, then we can use those tools in ways that we've never imagined before. And so here in Lisbon, what we're doing is we're actually setting up a number of locations for our regenerative village in the city. And the core pillar is a healing heart center where people can come 7 days a week, meditate, pray, cold water, sauna, Reiki, massage, yoga, breath work, whatever it is that resonates with you, there's someone there who can help you in that pursuit. And we're really drawing this community that's interested in regeneration into the inner work just by being there and showing up and making it accessible for people to participate who may not have been able to before because of financial barriers. And so this Healing Heart Center in Lisbon is great, but we also want to create healing arts centers that can actually showcase the power of art, the power of music, the power of design when you are able to really tap into that root of love, of compassion, of grace, of interconnectedness, which is the byproduct, which is the result of healing. It's always there. And actually, you have everything that you need, founder. You don't need, DMT or this or that. You have everything in your body, in your heart, in your mind to heal and to be the fullest potential. And it's just about, going through the process. And so that's our thesis, man. Healing heart centers in the heart of every single startup city around the world. An entrepreneurial culture that embraces all of the science of well-being, all of the ancient practices of the past, and all of the powerful modern tools of the present. And says, let's go. Let's build a better world together. Let's do this.
That's beautiful. And I think what really resonates, right, is this idea of source. And that word can be interpreted in so many different ways, but fundamentally, I think is the level of programming or reprogramming that has to occur internally is so deep, because the external sort of cultural, societal programming is so separate from this vision of regeneration and so far away from that. And I love that that's at the heart of every single project that you're working on, both at the micro level with starting every meeting with, a couple minute meditation, through to even in the physical space, being able to start these healing heart art centers as well. So I love that. I love that. That's amazing, man. So let's dive into, with all of that in mind, let's dive into ReFi DAO. So tell us, give us the sort of overview of ReFi DAO from its founding to the activations you guys have seen. Part of why I wanted to have you on the podcast is because I'm really keen to highlight and explore stories where atoms are being changed with the power of bits. And so I would love to sort of hear the story of ReFi DAO through that lens, and how did sort of the founding occur, and what are the activations that you mentioned at the start, maybe just going deeper into those, and how are we regenerating the earth today through ReFi DAO? If you haven't yet explored the benefits of smart wallets and account abstraction, you should definitely check out Ambire Wallet. It is the wallet you wish you had when you started your crypto journey. Ambire works with all EVM chains out there, the layer 2s like Arbitrum, Optimism, Polygon, but also non-Ethereum ecosystems like Avalanche and Phantom. You'll never have to spend your valuable ETH again, because Ambire Wallet lets you pay for gas in stablecoins, one of the many perks of smart accounts. The web application of Ambire Wallet offers a number of fiat on-ramps for seamless conversion of fiat currency into crypto. And if you prefer self-custody with a safety net, you can recover a lost Ambire Wallet using an email, address, and password, without giving the Ambire team any control over your funds. Ambire Wallet is available on both mobile and web platforms, providing a range of features including a gas-saving mechanism, effortless integration with multiple dApps, transaction batching, and more cool functionalities to enhance your digital asset management experience. Stay tuned, as an extension of Ambire Wallet is coming soon, TM, to expand its accessibility even further. Want to get your hands on the Ambire Wallet? Check it out at ambire.com. And now, let's get back to the show.
Mate, that's a gift. Thank you for the invitation. So I think I would rewind to the story where I got excited about Klima DAO, and I became this evangelist of like, Klima, everybody get into this. I threw up an NFT profile picture. I made my background green. Like, I was totally a poser in deep water, which I had no right swimming in, but I felt at home. And I threw some money into it, and I really hoped for the best. I onboarded loads of people and saw this thing pop, like $1 billion market cap in 12 days. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is terrifying, because I know that the underlying value of these carbon credits is not $2,000. Like, it's way south of that. So there's really only one way that this is going to go, but I'm going to hold for my own conviction. And as I watched this transition from a Klima peak to a Klima trough, I recognized how many founders were coming into the space chasing a similar energy. I had ended up being invited to contribute to Toucan, which was the underlying infrastructure that made Klima DAO possible and still does today, a bridge with Vera that allows anyone with a Vera account to tokenize a carbon credit and to sell it into a permissionless pool using Uniswap. And I helped them with their kind of ecosystem growth hypothesis initially. And then they ended up saying, hey, like, can you help us with this and that? And I joined as an interim executive. And in that time frame, I at Toucan was meeting everybody who wanted to build with carbon, who wanted to build with plastic, water purification, land, satellite imagery, you name it. It was like this focal point of like, hey, Klima DAO and Toucan have made this thing pop. Let's go and see if we can use their infrastructure to build other things. And my hypothesis at Toucan was like, we need to create really flexible open source money Legos that other people can extend. We should have people building out their own bridges. We should have people, modifying the smart contracts to be able to do it for water, for, plastic, all of this stuff. And basically, we just didn't have the resources. We grew from 6 to like 36 people in 3 months. And the founders managed to raise an amazing round. And basically, I saw that there was no home for the people who weren't building with BCT or NCT. And so I was like, hey, like, we should create a space to gather. And actually, I didn't really want to start ReFi DAO. I was swamped at Toucan. And I had a bunch of people being like, yo, when ReFi DAO, like Timo from Basin, Jeremy from Resource, Felix and Julio from Crypto Commons Hub. All these people were like, yo, when ReFi DAO? And I was kind of like, I'm just trying to launch a podcast, guys. Like, all right, I guess we can make a brand, like a ReFi podcast brand, a ReFi DAO brand. Oh, and like, hey, Pierre from We3, can you also make a brand like for ReFi Spring? Like, and they did it, and they put out some really cool brands, and they designed this ReFi orb as like a symbol for the movement. Like, this isn't one individual startup, it's the whole movement. And as I grokked the power of this like movement-led brand, I started getting really excited, and actually found it a little bit hard to just focus on my heart, soul, and mind on Toucan. And so I started hanging out with a bunch of people in the ReFi DAO Discord and on Twitter Spaces, and met this amazing executive coach and social entrepreneur named Daryl. And he was like, yo, I just really want to connect with founders in ReFi. And I was like, why don't you run founder circles in ReFi DAO? Like, make it a thing. 3 days later, 35 founders in circles, amazing entrepreneurs, people like Justin Alanis, people like Paolo Palermo. There was an amazing bunch of people that started meeting and gathering. And that initial like community building around founders was really the heart of ReFi DAO, and still is to this date. And so we really were just a support structure for relationship building between founders. And the hypothesis is, if we can help connect founders to investors, to tooling, to partners, to collaborative projects, that'll have the highest leverage that we could possibly enact. And we're solely grant funded to date. And so we did this for 3 different quarters, supporting founders raising on Gitcoin, supporting founders with raising investment. We've supported a number of deals through our community as we have this network of VCs that actively deploy capital into refi, and this massive database of all of the people, all of the projects, all of the content, all of the events, and all the deals in climate and Web3. And so we're trying to do our best to use this massive graph of knowledge to support founders to have, a greater point of leverage to fulfill their mission. And it wasn't until about November or so that we started to think about like, okay, well, where do we go from here? Like, we're grant funded to date. We should probably like grow out of Gitcoin, but like FTX and everything's melting, and like I don't really want to raise venture funding because venture and all of that, strings attached business. Like, what do we do? And I had a good friend, Simmer Mangit, who's been my co-host of ReFi podcast, who's also a VC, who's like, yo, dude, ReFi Spring over here with these local events and ReFi DAO over here, like, you guys should really consider bringing the online community together to these in-person communities and like look at the network state. And I was like, nah, man, it's just a meme. Like, it's just, I can't be dealing with it. Similar people, Timo, Jeremy, going like, network state. And finally I was like, all right, I'll read the book. And I was just like, wow, this could change everything. It really could change everything if we have an online community of the world's most value-aligned, talented, and passionate entrepreneurs, investors, researchers, builders, connected to local grassroots startup communities in the major cities where regeneration is being fought and won every day. If we can coordinate this new vehicle and have a long-term North Star to show up at COP as a recognized entity in this negotiation of how to transition to a regenerative economy by 2050, this could have huge potential. And we've been nurturing this and growing this idea over the last few months and getting a lot of pushback because we're a small team and we've actually kind of left the foot off of the founder community to look at this new architecture. And there's a lot of people who just don't like the idea of a network state, who don't like this idea of a new organizational structure. And so here we are in this kind of interim period, having activated ReFi Lisboa as the first node here in Lisbon, having hosted 5 events, having amazing energy and initial vision of how we can raise funds to acquire land with traditional Dream Factory, the first on-chain regenerative village in the world, and preserve it in perpetuity forever in their Earth Trust, and to really pioneer regenerative economics on the ground, in the soil, outside of Lisbon, where local corporates, local governments, local NGOs can participate in the formation of a regenerative economy and have a vote. And this, to me, is really the turning point. That if we're able to turn this on, of Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Finance, local conservation NGOs, local corporates with net zero commitments, all coming together on a single land-based project and publicly verifying capital flows using public ledgers, remote sensors, artificial intelligence, this unlocks everything. We can rebuild the entire environmental asset market from scratch with local validators, local land stewards, and local institutions who have an incentive to see it succeed. And so this is the hypothesis. This is the theory of change that we're testing out now. And we've got 18 other local nodes emerging, primarily in the global south. And this is uncharted territory. I don't know how this is going to work. I don't know how to do this. This is like crazy stuff happening, but this is where I feel called.
Awesome. And the calling piece is fascinating given the last sort of section we were just discussing, right? Which is like, you have tuned into your source and you have no idea where you're venturing, and you're venturing here because it's like totally uncharted waters. Like, no one in the history of mankind has put something analogous to ReFi DAO together and is now trying to figure out, we have the climate crisis going on around us, and how are we going to deal with the situation, leveraging all of this cutting edge technology. And so to feel sort of perhaps disconcerted or trying to sort of feel your way through this whole process. And I think that's the thing, right? You have to feel the way through the process and see, okay, what's sort of drawing the attention. And this, I think a lot of us that read that network state book, and someone posted a tweet the other day and it said, why bother making new states if we have all these other states that work? And my question back to that was like, really? Do they really work?
They don't work.
Like,
guys,
they just don't work.
work.
Yeah. And it's and in fact, this idea of like throwing the baby out with the bathwater is like, let's not throw the bathwater out with the baby, because there are certain aspects that work within the
Yeah.
state, but the majorital substance of a state, by and large, has proven to be an ineffective means of coordination with where we are today. And specifically, when we look at, what COP are we on now? What's the
28.
next one? 28 COPs, right? And are
Oh,
we in a
that's a
better
lot of
place
years.
than
No,
when we
no,
were in the first one? And the answer is no.
nope.
And
We're
so
in a much
why
worse
are we
place.
pouring in? We're in a much worse place, right? And so this illusion that the UN and the COPs, and again, it's not to say that they haven't established any sort of meaningful frameworks, or the Paris Climate Accords were like a really meaningful contribution, and there's a
Totally.
lot of good that has come out of these initiatives and sort of substrates of coordination. But can we do better? We have to do better. And so how do we do that, right? And like that's what I always, and I think it's been just a really big theme as I've been speaking with different folks on this podcast, is we have this like incredibly advanced technology that's being held back by these really archaic systems. And
Mm-hmm.
even this podcast, like being able to transmit this like incredible story of
Mm.
you and ReFi DAO all over the world 100 years ago would have just been impossible. Imagine what we'll be able to do 10 years from now, right? And so I just like I'm just so excited about this, and so excited about local action,
Yeah,
especially being based here in Guatemala, but having a foot also in Europe and the North as well, is like,
totally, brother.
how do we bridge these worlds? And so that's what I'd love to explore next. You mentioned that
Mm-hmm.
a
Mm-hmm.
majority of your local nodes are in the global South. Tell us more
Intentionally,
about sort of
yeah.
these local nodes, and that are emerging right now, and how are you sort of nurturing them? Where does this network state thesis sort of come into play here? And specifically, let's put on sort of the global South hat on as well, because I think that's like
Mm-hmm.
a really important part of this conversation, where it's like, if we look at who oftentimes is leading and developing a lot of this cutting edge technology that we've talked about, whether that's AI or blockchain
Mm-hmm.
or climate tech as well, it's like oftentimes developed in the North and then sort of said, let's deploy this in the South. So I'm curious to explore that side of the equation here as well, is like, what's the thesis for like
Totally.
where ReFi meets the global South?
Yeah, 100%. And I'll take a really big macro perspective on this and narrow into the dynamic around climate justice of capital flows needing to go to the global South, which is to say that the cells in your body and the cells in my body all have a single source. At the beginning of time, there was literally nothing. And all of a sudden, out of nothing, exploded an infinite explosion of energy and matter, and mass came into being out of nothing. And we don't understand what happened, but it all has a single source. And out of this massive expanding universe that's expanded faster than the speed of light, we have Earth, the one planet that we know of which has life and water on it. And here we are, 8 billion people alive on Earth, when the science is very clear that it's impossible for us to be here. The number of conditions required for Earth to exist with life on it, there's thousands of conditions, and each condition in its own right is infinitely impossible. So here we are on Earth with 8 billion people and 420 parts per million CO2 in our atmosphere. And we have this crazy story where, based upon the emergence of a individual and a people group from which they were born, you have this like set of preconditions. And you go back to the root, you go back to the source. There's a source of the human story in the Middle East, in the Fertile Crescent. And there are these conflicts that have shaped our history and our story. And as anyone who reads Harari's work around Sapiens recognizes, the power of belief structures in shaping our narratives about the world and who we are. And the predominant story that we've been told is that we're separate, we're individuals, we're rational, and we're motivated by our self-interest. And the world of success that emerges from that is get as much as you can, as fast as you can, before anyone else gets it, because otherwise it's going to be too late, because there's not enough for all of us. Go. And this is the world we live in, where people in, developed economies have had the great pleasure and benefit of an increased quality of living because we've consumed more energy. It's as simple as that. Because we've had more access to it. It's simple as that. We didn't earn it. We didn't deserve it. None of us was born into the US or to Europe or any other privileged place because of anything about us. This is just the genetic lottery. And yet we have this responsibility to recognize this and to say, hey, like me and my ancestors have expended way more than our fair share of the Earth's resources. We still do. The average American's footprint is 17.6 tons per year, whereas someone in Kenya, it's like 4. It's many multiples of energy consumption, food consumption, water consumption, material consumption. And we have to take responsibility for this and say, hey, we in the global north, we need to consume less, and we need to support the emergence of a vibrant regenerative economy in the global south as a moral imperative for our story, to make just what has been done wrong through our colonial past, right? We're here because of slaves. It's a horrible thing to say, but the United States was built upon slavery and genocide. The most powerful country in the world was built because we killed people in the land of which we wanted to inhabit. And we brought slaves from Africa and used them as free labor because we wanted wealth. We wanted prosperity. We wanted that human story. And so for me, maybe it's just because I'm a privileged white man growing up in the US, but I feel that we have to do what is right for our children and our children's children, which is to tell them, hey, this is actually not what success looks like. Success is not, having a Lexus and a big house. Success is being surrounded by a community that loves you and cares for you. Success is being deeply connected to your purpose, your own desire. Success is serving nature and being fulfilled and knowing that actually your greatest safety net is not your balance sheet, but the amount of people around you who care for you and the wealth of information that you have because you're connected to nature and you know how she works. And you can work with her to get your needs met and to meet other people's needs as well. And this story, guess what? Guess where this story comes from? Indigenous communities in the global south. They have the keys to regeneration. The people who have not expended, countless kilowatt hours, who have not consumed countless plastic fucking water bottles. This story of regeneration is rooted in their DNA, in their bones, in their cultural lineage and history, but it's also intermixed with trauma. And until we learn how to bring these two stories together, the story of the developed economy, of the condor and the eagle, the story of the emerging market, and to make them as one with a new human story where we say we all live together in harmony, we're one species, we're one planet. Until we make that story work, this just isn't going to happen, because we're otherwise all going to be fighting for our own balance sheets, our own nationally determined contributions, our own GDP. It's just not going to work. And so for us at ReFi DAO, we really want to root this regenerative economy in the global south with the richest natural capital and the heritage of trust, of relationships, of community building, of people caring for one another and caring for the earth, because this is how we survive. Literally, this is it. I do not believe that engineered tech solutions are going to get us out of this mess. I do not believe that, CDR is going to suddenly wipe it all away. Yeah, it might stabilize the climate, but it might also destroy all of life in the process. And unless we create a new culture and a new society rooted in love for one another, rooted for family and community and nature, we ain't going to make it, yo. NGMI. So let's create a new culture. Let's create a new human story. Let's root ourselves in reality. And let's build a new future together. And let everybody contribute what they contribute. Let everyone pick up their own instrument and find this new symphony together. So that's my theory.
Safe, previously known as Safe, is a decentralized custody protocol securing $60 billion in assets today. It is establishing a universal standard for secure custody of digital assets, data, and identity. Safe is on a mission to unlock digital ownership for everyone in Web3, including DAOs, enterprise, retail, and institutional users, both through their Safe core account abstraction infrastructure, and of course, its flagship product, the Safe Wallet, the wallet we all know and love. Start using Safe or building on top of the Safe core account abstraction stack by visiting safe.global. And now, let's get back to the show. Yeah, I think that the idea of grounding oneself in what is most just and most freeing for folks is generally like a really strong moral foundation upon which you can start making decisions. Because I think this notion of this global family sometimes can even feel very one-sided, whereas it's just like everyone can flourish in their own right without imposing. And that's oftentimes this dissonance I see with folks that sometimes are like big advocates of freedom.
Mm,
I'm not gonna name names right now or any specific countries, but it's like
sure.
freedom at the expense of somebody else, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I personally see a rupture in the ideology of like, oh yeah, you can be free, as in we want our people to be free, but you guys are the ones that have to suffer the consequences of like this entire
Joke.
like project, you know. And so it's
Yeah.
just the lack of conscience is amazing, like astounding, right? And so
Yeah.
I guess
It's tragic.
it is, and that's, you know, I'm excited to see how you guys as ReFi DAO sort of balance the being able to this really powerful sort of intellect and wisdom that you have with regards to, okay, this is, you know, the role of local regeneration with regards to how technology plays into this and AI and all these other technologies, but also, you know, the infrastructure and the governance, and fuse that with really locally supported and grassroots organizations. Like what that didactic relationship emerges and looks like is what I'm going to be really curious to see, because I think, you know,
Mm-hmm.
countries like
Mm,
Guatemala, we have some of the highest deforestation rates in the world, and also
mm,
mega biodiversity in the country as well.
yeah.
Huge percentage of indigenous peoples, and also one of the most unequal societies. And so piecing all those things together and how you create structures and solutions that look forward and grow from that. And it sort of goes back to the question of like, is the state really the best vehicle
Yeah.
to fix these problems, when in fact the state was set up to perpetrate and exploit the most disenfranchised in the first place. So I'm just like a big, for that reason is why I really believe in network states, particularly in countries where the
Yeah.
state, like at least in the north, you can sort of see the state functioning somewhat well and providing a basic level of services. But I just see that less and less in the south. Sort
Mm-hmm.
of post-colonial societies
100%.
don't really feel that, right? And so, you know, the network state thesis merged with regenerative finance is one I'm really excited to sort of follow all along and participate in. And with that
Nice.
said, like let's talk about where you see ReFi DAO heading, and what's the kind of future of ReFi DAO. What are you feeling that will continue to emerge? You've talked
Mm-hmm.
about network states, but what do you really see kind of
Mm-hmm.
continuing to
Mm-hmm.
flourish as you plant these seeds?
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. So, um, the delicate balance you described around these amazingly powerful tools and technologies with local communities doing grassroots regeneration on the ground is an incredibly challenging dichotomy of considerations. And so, my invitation to everyone listening would be to say, check out our website, look at the local communities page, and see if there's a local community near you where you can participate in this conversation, because we literally do not know how to do this. No one does. It's never been done before. Regeneration doesn't really exist as a predominant paradigm. It's extraction. Extraction is ruling the day today. So, how do we transition? I don't know. It's probably, my hypothesis, going to look very different in Tanzania than it would in Guatemala. And so, if we can encourage people to gather regularly, we meet every third Thursday of the month in Lisbon, and we're encouraging all of the other nodes to do the same when it makes sense. Third Thursday of the month, the ReFi Nation gathers in a startup city near you, whoever you are. If you're a climate finance person or an AI engineer or a mom who just is worried about the climate, you are welcome here. Come. There's a safe space to ask hard questions, dumb questions. There's no dumb question. This is all of us learning together. Come to a local event. And our hope in propagating this rhythm, this network of consistent gatherings with a set of shared value around safe spaces, around meaningful contributions, around, diversity, around hope, around action, is that we'll begin to see design patterns emerge. At ReFi Lisboa, we feel quite drawn to, getting a number of spaces set up where members of our community say, hey, our Healing Heart Center is available these days a week to members of ReFi Lisboa. Our venture studio here in Lisbon is available, for this entire time, and you have to have this role to get in. And we're actually prototyping a number of tools, a physical device a key into the local economy here in Lisbon that you get when you are onboarded into the village, that gives you access via an NFC to physical spaces, residency, venture studio, co-working, healing heart center. And we can begin to really bridge the digital and physical world together and use this as a sandbox for innovation to say, hey, we want to build this piece of hardware, friends, and we want it to be open. We want to allow other people to plug into it. Kind of like, what it would be great if Whoop or Aura was open source. And you could actually build this piece of hardware and say, like, hey, what does the physical key in Lisbon look like? Well, the people in Lisbon are actually, they've got an NFC chip, but they've also got, heart rate monitor. And they're playing with these different tools to give people access, but also to give people signals and feedback and information. That as they access these communities, they can recognize how it affects their world within through their heart rate variability. And we can start to play with this culture of like, what does music look like when everyone in the room has a heart rate monitor and the beat is signaling to them and they're signaling to the beat? What is this? How does this feel? And maybe the people in Sao Paulo go super deep with the local indigenous community and appoint a council of elders where they meet regularly and just listen and make music out of whatever comes there. And maybe the folks in Medellin, they're working on a project with the Parks and Recreation Center, and that piece is working. And if we can all come together regularly online and in person and share what's working, we believe that the design patterns will emerge for us to cross-pollinate and propagate what is effective at creating local communities of people that belong, that have the opportunity to take action and celebrate the success of their contribution, and to really build a snowball where everyone has an opportunity to see the problems that are being faced in the local community and to figure out, where do I get involved? And really to just be honest and open about what's working and what isn't, and to be really careful about where we financialize things. Like, ReFi DAO is not a DAO. We don't have a token. There's no governance. It's a long-term vision of regeneration where we can see there's a path to decentralization through these local nodes, that these local nodes can nominate delegates to participate in governance, because we don't want this just like global governance layer that doesn't honor local sovereignty. But how do we get there? How do we get to a kind of UN for a regenerative economy with local startup communities having a seat at the table? I don't know. Is it NFT based? Is it ERC20 based? Is it something we've never seen before? Is it a mixture of the two? I'm not sure. And my hypothesis is we start small in Lisbon. We work with a local impact DAO in a very small contained environment. Maybe we play with some NFTs and token gated access through this physical token. And maybe we work with an institutional pool of capital that has nothing to do with the NFTs to say, this is how we acquire the land. This is how we separate concerns from a security standpoint. And this is how the NFT gives you access to the land that we're regenerating in Alentejo with TDF. I don't know. Maybe this is the way, maybe it isn't the way. But if we build in the open, if we meet regularly, if we all do our best, if we all try and support each other and really collaborate to see this regenerative economy come to life, I think we got a chance. And even more than that, I know we're going to make this happen. Like, 2053, I will look back and be like, yo, Ruben, my eldest son, like, we did it, homie. Like, you got generations to come. Don't worry about it. Climate change ain't a thing. Biodiversity ain't a thing. Like, you got this, bro. And I'm taking a backseat now. Like, consider me Gramps. I'll let you flow. So that's the vision, man.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Yeah, I mean, um, with the kid on the way as well, I think that just like massively shifts the way you look and relate to the world, and can totally resonate with like creating this sort of longer term vision, and really just shifts your priorities, right? And you just step out of the way and you're like, all right, what does, in my case, Siana's future look like, and how can I build a better world for her? So I'm just really excited to do that, and really excited to kind of continue to grow and build and learn alongside you, John. Like, just thank you so much for all the work you're doing, and look forward to connecting and planting seeds together and harvesting this beautiful sort of garden that we're growing together as well. And so thank you so much, man. Any last words that you want to share with the listeners? Where can they find you? Anything you want to sort of leave us with?
Yeah. I think the invitation would be, as I had before, join a local community, check out ReFi Podcast. We're dropping a new season soon, called Birth of a New Nation. And we are really looking for a sustainable path for ReFi DAO to exist, to serve the needs of this community in a way that is regenerative and not extractive. And we'd love to invite anyone who wants to help shape this vision and articulate the execution path to do so. And even more so, I would invite people to challenge me and any of the other leaders at ReFi DAO, and to keep us accountable for staying true to these values and for building in the open, for building for the community, with the community, and for really doing what we said we're going to do. And so I really appreciate, in particular, some of the members of our community who've raised concerns recently following this Gitcoin coordination game we're popping off at the Solarpunk Guild. Urtu and Guido and Umberto, hard words are good words. Criticism and skepticism is love. And we are not going to get there to a regenerative future if we don't all come the fullest version of ourselves. So grateful to be here on the pod with you, Marcus. Would love to have an episode with you on our show at some point in the future. Hear more about the beautiful insights you've gained through your Ethereum Foundation Fellowship and all the work that you're doing. And yeah, man, wish you well. I hope that little girl comes into the world safely and gently, and that you have the most powerful journey ahead of being a father amidst all of this and really experiencing the depth of love that life can bring. So that is my blessing to you, my friend, and to anyone listening.
Thank you, John. Really appreciate it, man. Well, yeah, we look forward to following along your incredible journey, and have an amazing rest of your day, man.
Awesome, Marcus. Peace be with you. Folks can check me out on Twitter at ClimateXCrypto, but I got to change that handle soon. We need something with generation in mind. All right, Marcus. Bye, buddy.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of Odyssey, and thank you for joining us on our collective journey as we look to explore where crypto has the opportunity to drive real-world impact in the societies of tomorrow. If you haven't yet already, make sure you subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts, and also that you've joined our Telegram community, which you'll find below. I'll see you on the next one.